Hey everybody, I saw a video for Renderman talking about displacement, scalar displacement layers, which I thought was really cool. Displacements have always kind of intrigued me as a 3D artist, just kind of a way to fake surface geometry through texture maps. So here what I have is I have a glass bottle that I've modeled, and what we're going to do is we're going to use a scalar displacement layer in Renderman to create two different sets of displacements because they do not affect each other. They are meant to kind of have separate functions. So let's get started. I'm going to go ahead and open up my hypershade here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down into materials here, and I'm going to select Pixar surface. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create the glass. I'm going to create the glass texture, and I've already gone over and I've kind of done this. But the great thing about glass is there's different types of glass. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my gain in my diffuse all the way to 0. I'm going to drop my color all the way to black. I'm going to make sure that inside my advanced here nothing is selected. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip primary specular for a moment. I'll come back to that, and I'm going to look right inside my glass function here. So I'm going to take my refraction gain and plug that up to 1. I'm going to take my reflection gain and I'm going to put that into 0.2. Now these two sections, refraction gain and reflection gain, are meant to work in cohesion. They're meant to be cohesive with each other. But the particular glass bottle that I've decided to replicate, it doesn't necessarily have a ton of reflection to it. It's a type of glass that doesn't reflect the surrounding environment. So I'm going to keep that relatively low. I'm going to take my refraction color and leave that at white. And then I'm going to take my roughness and I'm going to leave that at 0.1. And inside advanced here, anisotropy, I'm going to leave that at 0. And now refractive index, which is really cool about this in Renderman, is you can actually go to a website and you can look up the actual refractive index for the particular piece, whether that's a metal, a glass, whatever it has, whatever you're looking for. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave that at 1.5. That is exactly what I need. Interior and advanced here you can just ignore. These are more for like if you were to have a fluid or some type of substance inside of your glass. Let's go ahead and take a look and see what it does. Highlight that, right click and go assign material to viewport. Let's fire off a render and see what we got. So it looks pretty good. Looks like glass. And all I have set up for my lights here, as you can see, is I just have a single plane. I have a directional light. And then I just have a, what are these called? A dome light with just an HDR map applied to it, and it's giving off a very small amount of light. So let's take a look at our render. So it looks pretty decent, looks like glass. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to go back to the primary specular that we were talking about, because it is reflecting the light, the surrounding environment. What I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm actually going to change this from artistic to physical. I'm going to pump up my edge color all the way. And I'm actually going to leave refractive index right there. And I'm going to leave extinction coefficient right there. And then as far as roughness, I'm just going to drop this down to 0.1. So we get some nice shiny specularity. Inside advanced here, I'm going to change my specular model to CGX. We can leave the rest of this alone. We can leave double-sided alone. And then in rough specular, if you really wanted to, you could do the same thing in rough specular. Sometimes it depends upon your lighting situation. Now let's go ahead and plug in our displacements. So, close that out. What I'm going to do is give myself plenty of room to work here. I'm going to hit tab, type in pxr texture. I want to make sure to linearize that. Hit 3 to expand. Grab my file, which was source images. It was this one? Yes. So I should explain a little bit. So what I've done is I've created these texture maps. I've UV unwrapped the glass bottle, and what I've done and what's really cool about displacements is that they're very black and white based. So whenever things are black and white, I usually only like to work in 4 steps, and that's pure black, white, 50% gray, and then either 25% or 75% gray. So excuse me, 5. So what I've done is I've created the image or the extrusion or bump displacement, excuse me, that I would like to appear as if it were coming out of the glass or coming off the glass or part of the glass essentially. And then I've done that for the other side. And then on the glass bottle that I particularly chose to model, it has a little bit of a weld mark or something like that. So this is kind of our first layer. This is the first thing that we are going to focus on. Our second layer is purely just these little white dots up here where anything white with a displacement, a scalar displacement within Renderman, is going to extrude out. Black is going to stay the same. So black doesn't change. Anything above black will extrude out. So as you can see in here, I have a 25% gray kind of bleeding into white, and then some 50% gray details that I've created to kind of give some different, I guess, elevations. All right, so let's go back to Maya. So I've got my texture for that displacement. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit tab and I'm going to go pxr to float. And this will take the 3-channel RGB and create it to a float, which is what our scalars are going to be using. And then I'm going to hit tab, pxr displace, and then I'm going to grab displacement scalar layer. I'm going to hit 3 to expand this, take my result F, and I'm going to ignore the base layer, and I'm just going to go right into layer 1 displacement scalar. Then the next thing that I'm going to do is hit tab, pxr displace. I'm going to take my result F and I'm going to plug that into my display scalar. Then I'm going to delete this, take my out color and plug that into the displacement shader. All right. Now, one thing that you need to have set up before you assign the material is you need to go back to your glass and up here into attributes of the model or polygon. You want to go into Renderman and you're going to want to create a subdiv scheme, otherwise this will not work. I've already got one set up. Back into my hypershade here. Alright, so let's fire off a render. Let's see what it does. Now, as you can see, this is wickedly out of control. But the good thing is when you see this, odds are likely that your scalar is working. Now it's just a matter of going through and tweaking the settings. So I am going to grab my Pixar display scalar. I'm going to leave overall gain. That's going to adjust the overall gain for all of the layers. And I'm going to take my layer 1. I'm going to drop my layer 1 gain down to 1.5. And then I'm going to hop into the displacement node. And I'm going to drop my gain here down to 0.01. And then in Renderman attributes here, you want to adjust your displacement bound. And this is going to help reduce artifacts with the displacement. I'm going to drop this to 0.1. All right, let's fire off a new render, see what that did for us. All right, so super tough to see, but let's zoom in. So the hard part about working with glass is sometimes your renders are not going to be very fast. You're not going to be able to see a great image right away. I'll just give it a moment here. So I can see some of the details that I created. Let's up the bump just a little bit. I'm going to go back into my scalar displacement layer and take my layer 1 and let's just, I don't know, bring it up to 0.5, see if we can see anything. There we go. So, like I mentioned, some of the settings inside of the displacement you'll have to play with a little bit. But what's great is we've got the words and the, I guess, signias or design of that bottle shining through. But you can also see behind here on the other side that it is doing the same thing and reflecting and bending the light accordingly. So now what we'll do is let's go ahead and plug in our other layer here. So I'm go back to my hypershade, hit tab, and sometimes tab doesn't like to work. There we go. Create some texture. Bloop. Linearize, file folder, and it is this one. There we go. So I'm going to want to create another float node for this to plug into. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my result F and I'm going to plug that into my layer 2 displacement scalar. All right. So the one thing that I'm going to do here, though, and this is kind of where this is useful rather than creating one map, is with my first layer I wanted everything to kind of more or less displace out. For my second layer, I want it to bump in. So I'm going to change my layer 2 gain to -0.5 because the black will stay the same. The negative value will push it in instead of out. And let's see what that did for us. Let's pop up here. Now the alignment of these may or may not be right on, but there we go. Let's see. Let's see if we can see these. Oh, there's my problem. I didn't turn it on. Make sure that you enable these to get them to show up correctly. Let's see if that adjusts. It didn't. Let's start that over. And there you go. See, it's right there. Yeah, those didn't line up at all. But hey, that's all right. We achieved what we were looking for. It's bumping in, whereas the other texture is bumping out. Oh, not too bad. Let's see if we can get a little bit of a wider shot here. So, I mean, that's essentially it. It's more or less playing with the displacement settings to kind of get the overall displacement, whether negative or whether positive, as well as kind of messing around with the different glass settings to see if you can't get the right look. I did play around quite a bit, and this is what I ended up liking, and it looks pretty dang good. All right, thanks for watching, guys.